For the past 7 years, Emily and I had built a life together, filled with love, shared experiences, and the kind of intimacy that made us feel connected. Like any couple, we faced our share of challenges, but we always came through them stronger, united. However, in the last few months, a subtle shift had begun to unravel the fabric of our relationship. It started small, late nights when Emily would disappear into her phone, a growing disinterest in our conversations, and a noticeable distance between us. At first, I convinced myself that it was just stress or fatigue, both of us juggling demanding jobs and busy schedules. But the more I observed, the harder it became to ignore the changes. The touch we once shared, whether a simple hand on the back or a lingering kiss, had all but disappeared. I needed to address it. One evening, after another quiet dinner together, I decided to speak up. "Emily," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "I feel like we're drifting apart. You seem distant, and I don't know how to fix this. What's going on?" She looked up from her phone, a heavy sigh escaping her lips, as though she had been waiting for this moment. "There's nothing wrong," she replied, her tone colder than I had expected. I don't feel like I owe you intimacy. It's not something you're entitled to." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had never demanded intimacy from her, but I had certainly hoped for it, yearned for the connection we once shared. "It's not about entitlement," I said softly, my voice trembling slightly. "It's about us. About feeling close to each other. That's what we've always had." But Emily wasn't receptive. She rolled her eyes and responded dismissively. "Look, intimacy isn't the only thing in a marriage. If that's all you care about, then maybe you should rethink your priorities." I was stunned. This wasn't the woman I had married. The woman who used to hold my hand during quiet moments, who would smile at me across the dinner table. I felt like I was talking to a stranger, someone who didn't understand the value of emotional connection or the intimacy that had once been the foundation of our bond. I decided to let it go for the night, hoping things would improve. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. Something irreparable. Over the following weeks, the emptiness between us grew. Emily's words echoed in my mind. "I don't owe you intimacy." If that was how she truly felt, then what did I owe her? My love. My care. My commitment. Was that enough to keep a marriage intact when one partner wasn't interested in reciprocating? Despite my growing frustration, I continued to fulfill my role as her husband, trying to maintain the outward appearances of a normal marriage. I made sure she had everything she needed, my love, my support, my devotion. But inside, I was beginning to question whether any of it was worth it. Was I the only one fighting for this? And if she wasn't willing to meet me halfway, where did that leave us? One evening, I came home to find Emily laughing on the phone with a friend. She didn't even acknowledge me as I walked through the door. I stood there for a moment, feeling a pang of loneliness before I made my way to the kitchen. There, sitting alone on the table, was a half-eaten meal, a meal meant for two, but it was clear she hadn't bothered to cook for both of us in weeks. I missed the days when she would prepare dinner with a smile, when we would sit down together and enjoy a quiet meal. That night, I made a decision. If she didn't feel like she owed me intimacy, then maybe I didn't owe her the same love, care, and commitment I had been giving so freely. I started pulling back, emotionally and physically. I stopped asking about her day, stopped doing the little things that used to show her how much I cared. No more making her favorite coffee in the morning, no more fixing things around the house without being asked. I spent more time at work, or with friends, anywhere but home, where the tension was unbearable. It wasn't out of spite, it was a survival mechanism. If she didn't want to be a partner in this marriage, then why should I keep putting in all the effort? But as I withdrew, something unexpected happened. Emily, at first, didn't seem to notice. She continued with her routine, phone in hand, her attention elsewhere. She was still distant, still dismissive. The distance between us seemed to deepen, and yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing. One evening, I came home after another long day. Emily was sitting in the living room, scrolling through her phone, just like every other evening. I walked past her without a word, grabbed a bottle of water from the kitchen, and sat down on the couch. I wasn't angry, just resigned. I didn't want to engage in another empty conversation. A few moments passed before Emily spoke, her voice hesitant. "You've been really quiet lately," she said, her words unsure. "Is something wrong?" I looked up briefly, my eyes meeting hers. but I said nothing at first. The question lingered in the air between us, heavy with the weight of everything we had failed to say to each other over the past few months. I didn't know what to say. What was left to say? I didn't look up from my phone, keeping my gaze fixed on the screen. I've just been busy, I replied flatly, my tone distant, not quite sure how to navigate this moment. Busy with what? She asked, pressing, shifting slightly in her seat to face me. For the first time in weeks, Emily seemed interested in what was happening in my life. Work. Friends. Life, I said, shrugging slightly, trying to keep things light, though my heart wasn't in it. Her frown deepened as she looked at me, her eyebrows furrowing in confusion. You don't even ask about my day anymore, she said, the hurt clear in her voice. You don't seem to care. I set my phone down, meeting her gaze for the first time that evening. It had been a while since we'd truly looked at each other. I thought that's what you wanted, I said, my voice calm, but the words held a bitterness I couldn't quite hide. You made it clear that certain things aren't owed in this marriage. I assumed that went both ways. For a moment, her face fell, and I saw something that I hadn't seen in weeks, a flicker of vulnerability. She looked away, then whispered, barely audible, "That's not what I meant." Her voice cracked. "I didn't think you'd take it this far." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees, feeling a mix of frustration and exhaustion. "Emily," I said, my voice softer now, "do you even realize how distant you've been? How hard it's been for me to feel like I'm the only one trying to keep this marriage alive. You told me intimacy wasn't owed, but a marriage isn't just about duty. It's about mutual effort, mutual love. And for months now, I've felt like I'm in this alone." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, she said nothing. Then, in a soft whisper, she admitted, "I didn't realize I was pushing you away. I thought I was protecting myself." "Protecting yourself from what?" I asked, genuinely confused. She hesitated, her voice shaking as she spoke. "From getting hurt. I've been feeling disconnected too. But instead of talking to you, I built walls. And now, I don't know how to bring them down." Her honesty hit me like a wave. For so long, I'd been consumed by my own feelings of rejection and loneliness that I hadn't once stopped to think about her perspective. I took a deep breath, letting her words sink in. "I'm not perfect," I said after a pause, "but I can't keep doing this alone. If we're going to make this work, we both have to try. You have to meet me halfway." She nodded slowly, wiping away the tears that had begun to fall, her expression filled with both pain and relief. "I don't want to lose you," she said, her voice trembling. "I've been scared. Scared of admitting how unhappy I've been. Scared of how much we've changed. But I want to try, if you do." Hearing her say that, it felt like the weight I had been carrying for so long lifted from my chest. For the first time in months, I felt like we were on the same page, even if just a little. "I want to try too," I said softly, a small smile tugging at my lips. "But we need to communicate, Emily. We can't keep shutting each other out." That night we talked. Really talked. 4 hours, we shared our feelings, our frustrations, our hopes. Emily admitted that she had been feeling overwhelmed and unappreciated. I shared how her rejection and indifference had made me feel invisible. It wasn't an easy conversation. There were moments of silence, moments when the words felt too raw, too painful to say. But it was the first honest conversation we'd had in a long time. In the days that followed, we began to take small steps toward rebuilding our relationship. It wasn't easy. Old habits die hard, and there were times when we both slipped back into our defensive patterns. But we made a conscious effort to communicate openly, even when it was uncomfortable, even when it felt easier to pull away. A few weeks later, Emily surprised me. She cooked dinner, a meal I loved, one she knew would mean something to me. It wasn't perfect. The edges of the dish were a little burnt, and the timing was off, but it was a gesture that showed she was trying. It wasn't the grand gestures we used to share, but it was enough. I helped clean up afterward, something I hadn't done in far too long, and we sat together on the couch, the silence between us comfortable for the first time in ages. "Thank you," I said, looking over at her. "For what?" she asked, a small smile playing on her lips. "For trying," I replied, my voice filled with gratitude. "It means a lot." She reached out, taking my hand. It felt foreign, yet familiar, like something we had both been missing but had finally found again. "I know I have a long way to go," she said, her voice soft, "but I'm glad we're doing this together." Slowly, over time, we began to rebuild the foundation of our relationship. It wasn't about grand gestures or perfect solutions. It was about the little things: a kind word here, a thoughtful act there, a shared laugh, a moment of understanding. Little by little, we began to find our way back to each other. Looking back, I realized that the turning point wasn't just about my withdrawal, or Emily's reaction to it. It was about both of us recognizing the patterns that had led to our disconnection and making the conscious decision to change. Marriage isn't about keeping score, about determining who owes what to whom. It's about mutual effort, understanding, and the willingness to grow together. As we sat on the couch that night, holding hands, talking about our future, I felt a glimmer of hope that had been missing for so long. It wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, I believed that we could make it work.